Hello, crypto community. Jeff Kerdakis here with Douglas Horn, the chief architect at the Telos blockchain network. Doug, thanks so much for coming on today.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me. I've been really excited to talk to you.
So a lot of people, Telos, EOS, they're both running on the EOSIO software. People have a little bit of confusion on what are the overlaps, what are the differences? How would you quickly explain what the differences are between these two platforms?
Okay, great question. Yeah, so Telos and EOS and other chains like Boss or whatever are all running on the EOSIO reference software. But some of these add additional development on top. So Telos has done probably the most additional development on top of EOSIO. We added a lot of governance features that were promised from EOS but never materialized, like working WPS, worker proposal system, the ability to update the governance and things like that. And so we added a lot of that. We also added some resiliency features, and then we've added a lot of functions that apps can use for themselves. Like, for example, it's very easy for any app on Telos to do voting within their token without having to build those things for themselves. So those are features that actually save developers a lot of time if they deploy on Telos. But
Gotcha.
Otherwise, they're the same. So aside from that, any EOS dApp can easily come to Telos and deploy, basically instantly. And any Telos app could go to EOS unless they're using some of the additional features that we've created, which don't exist in other chains.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And I really definitely want to double click on the governance in a brief second here, because I feel there's the governance that you guys have deployed is so efficient, effective, and really well managed. But there's something that's just been really pressing, I think, especially in the EOS community and people in the crypto community, if they're got their eyes on the developments, and that's that EOS has been under essentially a DDoS attack by an app called EIDOS, I believe, and so it's kind of almost frozen the chain. So can you talk a little bit about that, and how is Telos preventing a similar attack or mitigating something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there was another chain called Inu or something like that died, basically. They became centralized from their BPs, and it just sort of failed. And some people from that, or using their name, we're not quite sure who, launched what I call like a resource attack on EOS, which is basically incentivizing everybody to do what's literally the stupidest thing in blockchain, which is to use a DPoS, a delegated proof of stake chain, to do proof of work mining. Essentially, it's incredible. But they tapped into people's greed, and they were able to get on exchanges, and they were able to create the semblance of some market. Now, I don't think anybody who's spent much time in crypto thinks that this is going to be any value 6 months from now, but some people are mining it, or 6 weeks from now, or maybe even 6 days from now. But people are mining it. People are using their resources, and what's happened is they've incentivized people to use up all their CPU. CPU is bought from Rex very inexpensively. Rex hit a cap where it could no longer release or let people buy anymore, and it basically jammed up the system. Now, we're actually coming to the other side of that. There was a 30-day lockup. So the worst may be over. We're hopeful. We don't want to see this happen. A lot of people would like to be using EOS. And unfortunately, this has become the sole use of EOS right now. It's one of the reasons why EOS is #1 on Blocktivity and has such high transaction count. But actually, if you look at DApp Radar right now, EOS used to sweep the board on DApp Radar, and now it's not even represented in the top 10, top 20, right? So you can see that the way that EOS is being used has greatly changed. Now, on Telos, we have a few differences. We do actually have the same vulnerability right now, although I would love to tell you about how we've already started addressing that. But a coin called same folks, we think, called Rich Coin. People started mining that. The Telos people were not all that interested in mining that, and one of the reasons is, since we did the Telos economic development plan, people are getting north of 20% APR staking reward for staking Telos into Rex. So really this like bullshit little amount that they might be able to get by using those resources just pales in comparison, right? So basically we gave them something better to use that for. I mean, EOS Rex maxed out at about 1.5%. So the good thing that this did was really point out that the Rex numbers out of the box that were recommended by Block One were just not good numbers, right? They just don't work, and we should have like taken these things with a grain of salt. I think there's a lot of things where with new software, people have maybe had a habit of just kind of taking the out of the box default settings and using them, thinking that they might be the best. And what we're seeing is they're really not, and we need to be more discerning about how we do this. Telos has a culture of being more discerning about this, but we too took that out of the box. Well, already we're putting together a plan to address this. About 8 or 9 weeks ago, actually, I wrote something about this even before this attack came together, when the same people were doing a similar attack. And I said, hey, this is a possible exploit. Here's a couple things we could do about it. For example, one of those, the first one I talked about, was possibly limiting the amount of Rex that any one account could buy. Right. Now, that was never meant to be a magic bullet. There are still ways around it, but it actually solves or improves. I think it's more of a mitigation of these things. So that was about 9 weeks ago. A few weeks ago, I came out with an RFC for Telos that a lot of other block producers signed on for. That's called the TRIM plan. It's the Telos Resource Improved Management Plan. And it's a 7-point plan. That first one I mentioned is one of them. There's some at the very end, there's some sort of like total, like last resort things, like the ability for individual block producers to blacklist, accounts attacking. But those are not the things to focus on. The things to focus on really are what we're doing right now, which we are already on testnet. We're testing this plan to limit the amount of Rex that any one account can buy. You don't need to let one account. That was the first exploit, by the way, and that's how they were able to jam up the network for shorter periods of time with just one account, and then be able to essentially steal from a gambling app by calculating what random numbers were likely to come up. So that's something that we're already testing the fix of. We're also revising the numbers, the default numbers we have for how Rex is set up using setRex. And that's going to set a higher floor price for Rex. For example, right now on Telos, you can buy about 3,000 Telos worth of resources per Telos. We are planning to move that up to about 600 to 1 initially, and as that rises, that'll rise up to a top out around 20 to 1 at full usage of Rex. And we don't think that's the final end-all be-all, but we don't want to overshoot the number. So we're taking an approach with, let's make some changes. Let's make not huge changes, right? We don't need to make huge changes. Let's make some changes in the right direction. Let's empirically see how that works, make further adjustments. When you have a group of BPs that are actually dialed in and responsive and part of the community and listening to what people want, you don't have to have massive all-in-one, let's shoot for the moon and get this right solutions. You can say, let's do this, we think this is good, and then in 2 weeks let's look at it and see if we need to adjust, right? Because you're engaged. It's more management. I mean, there are people who think that EOS is basically got absentee landlords, and we're like the guy who lives, Telos is basically like, it's like a triplex, and the owner lives in one of them, and everyone else is running the others, and so if the heat is off, we all know it, right? Because we're not in Hawaii.
And I think that's a really important point to highlight, is the agility of the team to respond to, hardship, because like you say, there's no magic bullet or no magic formula to how to set it and forget it. You need to be able to adapt as things come in and out. And so what's setting you, Telos, apart from EOS in its ability to be agile, because you have the same setup in terms of block producers, are relatively similar. So why is it that you guys are able to be so much more agile and respond to hardships or challenges on the chain?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure I can fully answer that. I will say, by the way, there are some problems that have pretty easy solutions, right? There's the problems that have elegant solutions. I think our approach to RAM, to eliminating RAM speculation, which now all of a sudden is another problem on EOS, that was an elegant solution. We figured that out. We eliminated it. So far, Telos has only released 12 gigabytes of RAM. I mean, every BP has 32 standing by on all their servers. So we basically found a really good way to say, hey, it's not worth it. No one's going to make any money speculating on RAM. I know this seems like a problem of yesterday, but we found a good solution there. For the CPU Rex thing, I think it might be more like putting more goalies on the net. And you tackle each problem as you can. But yeah, we have people who are, look, the people who are running Telos as BPs, they're doing a few things. Number one, we all started it, or even the ones who came on early but weren't part of the launch group, we all came on because we want this to work, right? No one was going to be making $100,000 a month to do this. In fact, we operated at a loss for many months, and I think we're only coming into the time now where we break even. And frankly, that's a lot of chains are working with that. I mean, if you look at Telos, if you look at the BP pay on Telos is second only to EOS, right? All the other, and that's actually kind of a problem. We need BPs to make decent money. So BPs are seeing that they can make, break even, maybe make a small profit, and with a plan to do better as the token price appreciates. So we are taking care of them in that way. But really it gives them an incentive to want to rise up the ranks. And what you see is people were very concerned that on Telos you were going to have the launch group and they were just going to be sort of ensconced forever in the top of the BP ranks. And what we're finding is that is not the case at all. There's people in the launch group that have never been in the top ranks. There's people regularly who come in, other BPs, who are making, who make real contributions, who really dig in and who are climbing. Crypto Suvi Rinkinen, who's been sort of elected the president of the Telos Foundation. They weren't involved in the launch. You got places like, Telos Kitchen and EOS USA, people that had no name, and Telescope, people who weren't even involved, or people who were like less engaged in other chains, are in the top 21 regularly on Telos, because they are doing this work and people can see that, adding and building the chain equates to moving up in the voting ranks. So I think when you have this connection between doing good stuff and actually being rewarded, then people want to do good stuff. And I think it's God, I feel like I'm talking to, I feel like it's like a conversation with a 5-year-old. If you do good things,
right,
you will do well. If you work, you will make money. But what's weird is how disconnected that is from all the other, from many of the other chains, where there's like, well, why should I work? Because I'm not going to make it in there anyway. And frankly, a lot of BPs on EOS have been just trying to stay in the pay zone, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a tragedy, because a lot of those people work their asses off to build the chain, and would be massive benefit to the growth of the chain. Frankly, a lot of those guys are coming to Telos, and I'm really glad they are, because we want really engaged, smart people, and if they have to come here to get paid, we're happy to have them.
And there's obviously a lot more than just outside or inside the block producer. It's a massive ecosystem that needs to be rewarded: developers, marketers, the whole lot. And so how does that work in comparison to, just to oversimplify EOS, $4 billion war chest? It's like, okay, well, here's how we're funding everything, because
where's that war chest? Where is that?
Well, some of it got taken down by the SEC, but not much.
No, $28 million got taken down.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Great deal.
Less than 1%.
But but where is that? Where is that spent? Like everyone talks about this war chest. I mean, I agree. Like when Telos first came out, it was like, you guys are never going to be able to stand up against Block One. In fact, we never did an ICO. We never raised a penny. So we started out like, how do we get make everything out of nothing? And now we're built up to where we have worker proposal and the economic development plan. We've actually successfully bootstrapped. So we're way better off now than a lot of groups that have started out with a big old sack of money and are slowly watching that go away and learned their spending habits when they had plenty of money and thought it would last forever.
Yes.
It's radically different approach to kicking off a project. And I'm really glad that we did. It was extremely hard to start off. But when people said you're never going to be able to match up to EOS because Block One is going to be pouring at least $1 billion into this, and I was like, wow, I guess we'll just do our best, right? But I haven't seen that emerge, right? Have you? I would be really curious how much of that has actually been flowed into the EOS or EOS.io ecosystem.
Yeah, well, and to kind of touch on that, it's because you're 100% right. It's not the resources you have, it's the resourcefulness that you can put out there. And if you're building something grassroots and now becoming successful, top, I think like 130 coins on CoinMarketCap now for you guys, it's a formidable feat for a grassroots project. And you look at the EOS or Block One fund, and $4 billion at one point, and where it's gone. For example, for the Voice project, they spent $100 million on developers. They spent $30 million on the web domain.
On the URL.
On the URL, $30 million. It's like there's just such a disconnect there in value and where things should be going. And I think that's why bootstrapping is such a valuable thing for these projects, and to not just have this massive stash of cash like you're highlighting.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's crazy. Think about, okay, look, and look, you know what? Voice.com is a great name, right? I'm not here to second guess anything they're doing. I think that's fantastic. But if you do think about that, $30 million. Think about what injecting just $30 million into the EOS ecosystem could potentially do for it, right? Mm-hmm. Or, more to the point, think about what they just burned $110 million worth of EOS, right? Because they didn't have a way to distribute it, right? So think about an alternate reality where instead of burning that $110 million, roughly $1 million worth of EOS that was stored up in savings, if they had given that 55 companies, the top 55 companies in the ecosystem, developers, guys like Scattered, block producers, or block explorers, or people running history nodes, all these services that are important, right? If they had given each of those $2 million 6 months ago when they just decided to burn it, I'm not saying that's not a Block One decision at all, right? Mm-hmm. It's an EOS decision. But if either Block One had just injected $30 million into the system, or the EOS itself had injected that inflation that it had created that was earmarked towards building the system, if it had done that, where would it be? Where would it be with 30 or 55 or 110 or $140 million just extra money floating in there for hiring full-time developers, hiring marketing, doing any number of things. Frankly, all the things that we're doing with a very, very, very smaller war chest from WPS on Telos, but we're actually doing it. So the difference is, it doesn't really matter what you have and what you could do. It really matters what you do. Be proud of what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So how on Telos, how are people getting funded from the inception to right now? Because obviously that dynamic has shifted over time. And could you just walk us through, how that process has been?
Yeah, so we built from the very beginning a worker proposal system, but it took a while to kind of get it really fully off the ground, and it was collecting a limited amount of funds. But within just a few months, we had this up and running, and people could make proposals. In fact, the very first proposal was one that I made to pay Scatter because they had been such great developers in the community. They weren't involved with Telos at all, but a lot of us were using their wallet. So it's a simple process. Anyone can propose a worker proposal, system proposal, and there's no restrictions on it. Although it only comes down to what the voters will vote for. It's all 100% smart contract managed. You put together a PDF document or a video or whatever, host that on our IPFS system, which will soon be our DStore system, which is an upgrade to IPFS, and then engage the worker proposal smart contract, eosio.savings. Make this proposal, and people can vote on it. It kicks off a 29-day, 5 million block voting period, and at the end of it, if enough people have voted at all to reach the threshold, and there's a simple majority, then it passes. And you can do this through Squirrel Wallet. You can do it at Chain. You can vote or monitor progress on votes through chainspector.io. There's more places coming. There's Telos mobile wallets where you can vote and monitor votes, and it's really, really easy to use.
And where is this funding coming from? Because I'll just leave the question at that.
Sure. So initially, in the early days, it was coming from Telos had a 1.5% annual inflation for block producers, which we actually had a slight acceleration on in the early days because we needed the token price to be low, and 1% annual inflation for worker proposal system. So that all flowed in. What we realized later on, or we had an opportunity later on, when we discovered that the exchange reserve fund that we had set aside for any people who had their EOS tokens on exchanges at the Genesis time, and therefore didn't get their own Genesis accounts. So we had reserved the ability for them for exchanges to claim for their users, but very few did. Users, there was no way for them to claim for themselves. Unfortunately, it had to go through exchanges, and few of those did. And so a lot of those tokens that we had earmarked for that in a special fund were sitting unused. And while we hope that people still will do that and exchanges will still do that for their customers, it's slow to happen, and there's no value to those things just sitting there. So in sort of a very pragmatic Telos way, we said, hey, let's think what else we could do with these. And so we came up with, through a lot of discussion with the community, something called the TED plan, the Telos Economic Development Plan. And what that said is, rather than having these things just sit, let's flow them back into the system. So the Telos Foundation had an initial 6 million Telos worth of initial funding, but no ongoing funding. And so we voted, but they were doing great work, and they were real an asset to the chain. They're they're an actual entity that can sign contracts and do things outside, so we can rent, so we can pay for expos and conferences and advertising and all kinds of services, which is really hard to do as a decentralized network. So we said we definitely want to keep them. So let's vote them a certain amount of tokens every month. Worker proposal is killing it for us. It's great. Let's make sure that we double the amount we have there, draw those out of that. Let's increase the block producer pay for this initial period when the tokens are low, and things like that. So we set those aside. We did a vote. We made a proposal because, again, we built a system, smart contract controlled, 100% on-chain voting, where people can make these proposals, and if they win, right, if they reach the threshold, which is higher, and the voting threshold, which is also higher than a civil majority, if these things go through, then it becomes the new law of the land on Telos, and we update the programs accordingly. So we did that. Now for the next probably up to 3 or 4 years, Telos will be zero inflation, right? So we stopped inflation because we have this other source. Block producers get good pay. Worker proposal fund is more fully funded, and it just ensures that we and importantly, we flow 1 million Telos a month into the Rex rewards pool, so that anyone who stakes their Telos into Rex is getting, initially it was over 30%. Right now, because it's been a very successful program, we've got over 60 million Telos staked in Rex. It's around 20% annual percentage rate. But that's pretty good when you consider that, I mean, it's pretty good flat out. And also when you consider that this is like a zero inflation chain. So it's not just doing this like little shell game that a lot of like masternode coin things are doing, where they're, oh yeah, sure, it's, you know, you get 90%, but because it's 90% inflation, right? And what could possibly be wrong with that, you know? And a lot of those, even if they're not doing it that egregiously, they're also just not doing development. But Telos is like number 2 on Blocktivity, right? It's killing it on development, because probably some of the fastest blockchain development in the world, because we get the benefit of the awesome development and fast development that Block 1 is doing for the EOS.IO protocol, plus all the additional stuff that Telos is doing, funded by the worker proposal system. So, I mean, we have our own group of Telos core developers. They're funded, but there's also a lot of outside developers who come in and build tools and add services. And it's a profile of something that actually works. I would love for more people to see it, because this is kind of the promise. This is kind of what people were saying blockchain could be. And not a lot have actually fulfilled that. But I think what you're seeing is it actually is being fulfilled on Telos.
And I think the worker proposal is something that it just doesn't, I don't think, gets highlighted enough. You know, most of these corporations, companies in the blockchain space, very top down. Worker proposal system is essentially community governed. And I think that's not something that really happens in our global ecosystem very frequently at all. It puts power in the hands of many. And it always, for me, begs the question, okay, well, if you empower the hands of many, they may not have the most educated decision-making power. They may not have the full scope of information. What have you seen in that worker proposal system? Any things that stand out in terms of, okay, man, I really wouldn't have put this decision forward, or this one should have went through? What have you seen in terms of the quality of things that get pushed through in the worker proposal, and any friction points that have come with it?
Yeah, sure. So nothing's without its friction, and we fully view this as something that is a starting point, right? One of the most important things really is to create a system that can evolve and get better over time. And once you build something like that, it doesn't actually matter how bad it started out, because the thing with the best ability to evolve, right, through these governance things, is going to be the one that survives the best, right, in time. Well, I think we actually did a pretty good job overall. You still have to get there, right? So, and we're worried about the present, not 20 years in the future when we've nailed it. But we do understand that it's an iterative process. We're going to get better and better. But you know what? I'm actually kind of floored by how successful it is. The thing we're bad at is telling people how good it is and telling people about it. But the thing we've been really lucky about is people being involved. I think we have a great community. Like, when people talk about governance, they think about the laws and the rules and the structures for enforcing those and monitoring those and things like that. And what they forget about a lot is that this really important third leg of the stool is the culture built around it. And so it's actually an enormously important part. There's a political theory by a guy named Max Weber, who is called the consensus theory. And basically says that American democracy works, or any democracy works, because people generally believe the same core principles, and they're sort of arguing over stuff at the fringe, right? So so that establishing that is very important. And I think we're actually, I mean, to be honest, I think we're benefiting a bit from the geographic makeup of the people who are working on Telos, right? So it's a largely Western European, North American. I mean, there's a huge African component. It's just that I think we're fortunate that a lot of people are speaking English and able to communicate with each other. I'm not saying that speaking English or being European or anything that is necessary for success. What I'm saying is the fact that there's enough of a common consensus about what we're trying to do is facilitated by the fact that we share a background. And I think that what we're seeing, though, especially, I mean, there's an amazing story to how rapidly African nations are adopting Telos and loving it. Right. I mean, and that's a whole other culture. There is a lot of language, shared there, but it doesn't have to stay that way forever. But because we were able to establish a culture where people are able to talk to each other a lot and work from sort of a common consensus on a lot of things, it's built an ability to really talk openly about what we want for the chain. And there is friction because people care about it a lot. They're passionate and they have different views of the direction. And that's fine because we are able to use all these voting tools to make sure that the community and the chain is going in a direction that most people want. Right? That's what's important. That's what's missing on a lot of other chains, like, for example, EOS. And I don't mean to keep harping on EOS, but it's the most, but you asked.
It's a good reference point, yeah.
It's a good reference point, we all understand. So what's not happening there is people don't feel that their vote really can move the needle, right? Or their voice, can persuade other people to bring in their vote to move the needle, right? So that's when voter apathy happens, when people no longer feel like what they do is going to actually do anything. So why bother, right? And then even if you pay people like rewards to vote, it's like a country where, people have mandatory voting and they must show up to the polls, but, nobody gives a shit. And they, you get all kinds of weird things in those scenarios where people have like huge protest votes because they don't really connect improvements in their lives to the votes that they make. And that's what we do have on Telos. And that's why so far it's a really big success. And I'm hopeful that we can keep spinning that up as more regions of the world come in, because there's this nexus, there's this core set of culture that people are now adding on to and adopting rather than working from a lot of different places from the get-go.
Yeah, and I really commend you guys from having built from a foundation, being so agile, so adaptive. I think that's what's really set you up to be able to build some of these new features so successfully. Right, you're talking about the decentralized storage, your spin on IPFS. I think this is something, it's absolutely globally revolutionary. And I think maybe like the worker proposal, this may be something that is not highlighted enough at all in our ecosystem. You want to kind of dive into what are you guys building in terms of decentralized storage and what impact can this potentially have on the world?
Absolutely. Well, and the thing about worker proposal is we absolutely borrowed from other groups that were doing it. We just, we were able to go to school off Dash and others and see what they've done and what worked and what didn't work. So we didn't have to completely start from ground zero. So that was actually very helpful. I think we've been able to spin this into something where it's even more participatory because unlike Dash, everyone can vote. And unlike some others, where it's people, it's kind of like more of a poll and then, somebody does something with the poll, it's 100% smart contract control. So these things really fulfill that promise of what the dream of blockchain and blockchain governance is supposed to be. That's super important. Moving on to decentralized storage, we have a lot of dApps that are promising and meaning to and absolutely doing a move towards the decentralization of organizations and apps, where someday we can not have to worry about Facebook being evil with our central data because they don't exist, right? We can get all the services of that without the centralized company. We can get all the services of a Lyft or a Uber or something without the Uber, which means that suddenly there's no longer these massive profits that are extracted from the system. It all stays in. It's it works. It's absolutely not communism like people may think. It's just a different way. It's more like a co-op, right? In the best possible way, empowered by technology in a way that co-ops never could be before. But there is sort of an analog, but better, right? That's what we're moving towards. That's the way these decentralized organizations and decentralized apps are the way we're going to be, faster than we think, right? Not as fast as we'd like, but faster than certainly those other companies can imagine. That's where we're going to move. But a lot of, for that to happen, and one of the things that's held that up is you need to have storage, right? If I'm going to prove that all these vegetables were grown organically and, and on this store, and I'm going to track that, we all understand about these traceability things, right? Well, I can't just say, okay, well, I can't just say, okay, today they were here and yesterday they're here and now they're moved to, the grocery store. Like, we can timestamp all those little things on the blockchain, and we actually have built really awesome proof of concepts that are doing that, that are now being rolled into actual live projects. But to do that, you have to have, sometimes you have to, show just a document that's like a picture of the organic certification, and the truck you have to have the bill of lading, and you have to have all these things, right? You're not going to have like a decentralized SoundCloud music app with no place to put the music, right? You need all of these things. You're not going to have, you're not going to have Dropbox without a place to put your files, right? It can't just be on the blockchain. Blockchain is an awesome technology, but it's not an end-all be-all technology. So decentralized storage is very important for any application, right? Right now, the DApps are either just not using files, which is a bad, which really limits their ability to do anything useful. They're using AWS, right, which is what they're mostly doing because it's fast. We're using IPFS, which has problems because it's slow. Files can just disappear for no reason. It's just not sort of ready for prime time because there's some deep problems with it. We initially put IPFS, we called it Telos IPFS because we solved a few of the problems. And we were really excited. And we did that over a year ago now, in time, about a month before we launched. And it's been really useful. Anytime we show a worker proposal, we need to store that on some kind of IPFS system, right? So that people can know that it hasn't been changed. That's very important, but it's not fast, it's not ready. And so we took here at GoodBlock, actually, a lot of the work that we had done trying to upgrade Telos IPFS to be like, a big deal and really work for everybody. We had some real snags, and frankly, we thought I wrote about 9 months ago that we thought it was better just to kind of keep it going as it was and be ready for Filecoin because they were doing so great. Well, in that intervening time, we kept working on some things because we couldn't quite let it go, Yeah. And also we were trying to stay up with them. And Filecoin, a lot of these things, Saya and storage, they haven't advanced. I mean, these are 3 or 4 year old projects now, and they haven't really delivered on their promises. And that's what we were seeing as well. And so we actually were able to develop a technology that solves essentially all these problems. It's low cost and truly decentralized, like IPFS, but it's high data persistence, high speed accessibility, like traditional cloud services. And then it has these extra pieces which are really cool, which is sort of because the way we route, which is something we're applying for a patent for because we think it's really truly revolutionary. We basically have built-in DDoS protection, and a very good chance that we're going to be able to be highly resilient against some government blockages, right, from repressive governments that don't want their people to be able to have access to information. So we're very excited about that. That's going to be coming out we're going to go launch our beta on that, I believe, in January. And it's a phased beta, so more people can come in as it goes along. But we think that's going to be really huge for Telos because at least while it's in beta, eventually everyone will be able to use it at any time because it's decentralized storage. But initially, during the extended beta period, so we make sure everything is spot on, it's only going to be available to apps on Telos. And we think that's going to be a real advantage to any app that's already on Telos, and a reason to come to Telos for those that aren't yet.
I love it. And for those who are maybe a little bit newer to decentralized storage, how it operates and its benefits, you know, you mentioned resiliency against governments who are heavy on censorship. How exactly does that circumnavigate, you know, the big firewall of China and things like this?
Well, how many hours do you have to discuss?
Yeah.
Why don't as a guy who often goes along and that's on a topic that's easy to go very long on, I'm gonna try and keep it short. So
Thank you.
because it is central, because the storage nodes are all over the world, and because we have a special sort of mesh system. This is a core part of what we're patenting. So I'll describe it sort of loosely. We have a mesh system that allows the reflection of requests in a very intelligent manner. That's very fast. That's almost no load on the basically DNS system. That means that basically I've already gone too far, so I've said too much. It means that basically if you're somewhere in the world and you look up to a DStore, it can look all around the world, but it's going to first start in the ones closest to you in your region that have the lowest latency and the best available resources, and it's going to send you to those. And that means that, but it's a mesh, right? So anytime something is within this system, as long as you can get to one node in the system, you can get to the whole system. I guess that's the way to put it. So, so the DDoS is something, the process I was describing just a second ago is what keeps it from getting overwhelmed ever. We thought about this really well. I think we did a lot of looking at how torrents work and how all those technologies work, and applied a lot of the learnings to that and IPFS, and ended up rewriting IPFS. So it's using that to make sure that you can't really like DDoS it. And then there's also the second piece that once you're inside the system, you can anything can access, and you have access to the entire system, and it's meshed outside, in a way that is not affected by like the Great Chinese Firewall or Russia's or anybody else's thing. So it's not 100%, but it's but the ability to take it down is it's hard to take it down. It would have to be a constant game of whack-a-mole by the government to take it down. They can't do it just the way that they're doing that they take down Google, right? And also, hey, Google participates in that, right? That's one of the reasons that you can't get Google in China, is not just because the Chinese firewall is so great, but because Google says, okay, great, fine. We don't care that you have 1 million people in a re-education camps, or what you're trying to do in Hong Kong. We don't care about anything. We just want people to be able to use Google in some way in China. So we will acquiesce to what you're doing on a decentralized, and of course, by the same token, people need to follow the laws of the countries that they operate in. I understand that. But but the internet is, transnational. It's outside, it's not operating inside of any one country. And so the people operating these nodes may feel that they have the ability to give, people living in these countries under these governments the opportunity to work in a person-to-person, peer-to-peer way, which really is how I think the planet should work, right? We should be working together, trading, doing whatever we're doing together on a human-to-human basis, not filtered through massive governments that have their own priorities, which often is suppressing their very own people, right?
I couldn't agree more. I've never seen or heard of a net positive on the human scale of suppressing information flow to a populace. So it's
exactly.
It's so logical. Like, of course, people should have access to free flow of information, and being oppressed by a government is something I think so many people, well, billions literally in our world, are subjected to right now. And so something like this decentralized storage can really totally transcend all of that. So, obviously
we really hope so. And we've really bet here at Good Block, we really bet the farm on it. And we're excited about, we're excited about it because it's a huge project. It's a moonshot. I actually personally, I mean, it's weird to think about these things when you yourself are working on them,
Right.
but I truly think that this is a foundational technology of the new internet, and it's something that can empower all these sort of like, better human person-to-person strengths that we hope for. And frankly, I'm an older guy than you. I remember when the first internet and the first web came out, and we thought we were going to have all these things, and it went this other way,
Right.
where whether it's governments or the sort of quasi-governmental multinational corporations, we're still got to kowtow to somebody. And I still think that there's a possibility that we can that blockchain and decentralized internet and things like that can be that last bite at the apple of trying to make it a world where individual people are the priority and governments serve us instead of the other way around.
I fully agree. And I know you may need to maybe dance around this question because of legal ramifications.
Why start now?
I'll ask it as hard as I can. So you're building something that has potential to change the way that the internet operates today. Now, someone holds a Telos token. How is this impacting, you say moonshot, how is this impacting their potential 100x gains? And I know you have to sidestep this question a little bit, but I just got to shoot it.
I actually don't have to.
Oh, really?
So I will sidestep the question, but I don't have to, because we didn't, one of the things about we never ran, people have to sidestep these questions because they're on questionable legal footage to begin with, because they ran an ICO that is likely a security offering. We never did that, right? So secondly, they have to do it because they're the CEO of a big company or something. Well, there is no I ain't the CEO of anything except maybe GoodBlock, and which is a small company. And
Yes.
and Telos itself is not like there's chains out there like Wax and Lynx and Warbly and stuff like that, which are frankly owned by a company. And so those companies, and that's fine, and people are fine with that. I'm not going to dig on that, but those CEOs of those companies have to be very careful in what they say, because they are somebody who is basically an authority on, an authority meaning that they have the ability to make changes. I'm a guy who owns who owns a nice little chunk of Telos, but not 2%, right? So I and no one in a regulatory body would look at me and say, oh yeah, this guy, GoodBlock is really Telos. We're not. Right. It's actually, I can say all I want. So I'm not going to, because the reason I'm not going to is not because I can't. The reason I'm not going to is because while I know that it's important that people understand, that people think about token appreciation, and I certainly hope that happens, and I expect that to happen, but nobody knows anything, and I would hate for people to, I'm not here to shill. I'm here, my belief is if we make something that is great, that has great technology, and so that it has high value, that the price of the token is likely to follow. So my focus is doing everything I can, along with everybody else who's working on Telos, to build the value of the system, and the token price is completely out of my control. So I do think, though, that, to be clear, DStore is going to, at least for the first, foreseeable amount of time, only serve apps that are built on Telos, right? Mm-hmm. So does that, what does that do? What does that, if there's a decentralized Dropbox and a decentralized Backblaze and a decentralized, SoundCloud and all these things, the only ones that are actually decentralized are coming through Telos. I think that builds a lot of value for the chain, because it gives a real reason that no one else can match to come on to build on Telos. I don't know why people wouldn't anyway. There's a lot of reasons, but that's one more. And there's just, some of these things that we talk about, you can say, well, this chain has this and this chain has this, but nobody else is going to have decentralized storage in the way we have. And so I realize actually that the people are very excited about Tron having the BitTorrent. It's a little bit different, but that'd be the only other, group around that has any claim to this, right? I know that Ethereum has the Swarm, but that is built on, IPFS swarm technology, which is absolutely not ready for prime time. So I think that it drives enormous value. I think all these things that are happening on Telos drive enormous value to the chain. My personal belief is that the price of Telos does not price in anything that we've done. I mean, you look at Blocktivity, right? And you see what are the top two chains in terms of transactions are EOS and Telos, right? Number one and number two, but that is certainly not priced into, our market cap of $20 million, right? That's certainly, it seems like it's not, or else we're right and everybody else is vastly overvalued, which I don't think is true either. That capacity, right? That proven capacity is not being factored. The fact that we have this leading on-chain governance. Let's say it's along the lines of a Tezos, right? We don't have to say which is better or worse or whatever. Those two are the leading block, Telos and Tezos, very similarly named, accidentally. They're the leading governance chains. But we're not priced anywhere near like Tezos, and Tezos doesn't even have their smart contract platforms yet, right? So we're not being priced in that way. We have this decentralized storage coming that almost nobody else, that probably no one else has. That's not included in the price. We have these tools for DAC, the leading tools for DAC or DAO creation, where people can create easy to do, you can make a voting organization for your homeowners association or your football club or anything that needs voting, which is a lot of things. It's very hard to do. We made that super easy on Telos. Anyone can do it, and that's along the line. It's like a super Aragorn, but it's not really priced. That's not priced into it. So if you want to look at, is there opportunity for price growth? I personally think there is, because I don't think that the actual price reflects any one of these, let alone the fact that we're leading blockchain in 5 or 6 different areas. Even without, I'm not hyping or shilling, it's just true, right? You can look at each one of these and you can say, wow, any of these areas, Telos is right on top, and none of that's priced in. So when people ask me, when people tell me that they bought Telos and they're hoping it goes up, I sleep great at night, because I think it will too.
Gotcha. And what does that token price affect on the economy as a whole, in terms of, the cost to run apps, the pay that block producers get? Because obviously it's a dynamic moving entity.
Yeah, sure. So block producers are paid a fixed amount per day as block producers, and all the standby block producers get half that rate, right? So the block producer pay the amount that goes into worker proposals and things like that. Now we actually plan to reduce, as the price appreciates, we actually plan to reduce the block producer pay and the amount to worker proposals and stuff like that somewhat. So it's still getting more, but not so much. And what that allows us to do is extend the length of the program, right?
Right.
So we may have enough to run it for 2 years at exactly the numbers we have now. But if the price doubles and we knock some off, then we hope to slowly extend that out, so it's a 3, 4, 5 year a program, right? The only thing we won't knock down is the Rex rewards. So it is important. It means, if the worker proposal system is getting $1 million Telos a month and they're worth 10 cents a pop, then it's got $100,000 a month that we can use to vote for new development and marketing and stuff like that. The price doubles, right? And we knock 15% off, so we can extend it. Suddenly we've got $185,000 a month that we can use, and as it goes up, we have more and more to use. So tokenomics is important. Anyone who says that it's not don't know crypto, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got it. And so there's a lot that you guys have going on. It's not just the decentralized storage. You guys have a lot of new functions coming out right now. What are some of the ones that you're most excited about?
So what I'm really excited about, which is going to change everything for a lot of people, are these voting and governance functions. So Telos started out by creating all these things like our own worker proposal system, our own voting, and essentially the reason those don't exist on any other chain is the way that voting works for block producers can't really be spun out to anything else. It's its own sort of closed system. So we had to build a separate auxiliary system. But once we built that, we could use it for a lot of things, and we have. And we've now realized, or sometime back, we realized that that's not just great for a chain. Everyone needs that. Voting is expensive, hard, messy, it's a difficult thing to do for organizations to have their members feel like their voting is provable and being counted, and not have to go to some core, homeowners associations never, for example, only because there's, a million of them in America, right? And condo boards and things like that, they never get a quorum, right? Because everyone's got to go down to the senior center, and you get, you're hoping to God that they gave somebody, their neighbor, their proxy, so that you can get enough people to have a legal vote, right. By the bylaws. That happens every day of the week, right? Well, what happens if instead of that, we have people use Telos Decide, our voting and governance system, to create all those functions in an immutable, provable, transparent way that they don't have to do essentially any coding for, right? It's going to be super simple, both the front end and the back end. In fact, people don't have to create their own front end at all. There's going to be a common set of tools. Developers don't have to maintain that code because it's one set of code on the chain level. So the Telos core developers are doing it. So it really removes, it removes so many worries, right? The code's not going to be buggy. If it is, we're going to find it because somebody else is going to have the problem first, because 10,000 different voting groups or 100,000 are using this. So we can track it, stay on top of it. People can use, right now you're going to be able to do this through Squirrel Wallet or through ChainSpectre or through the other web apps and things like that. But soon there'll be many organizations can have their own dedicated one. But frankly, a lot of people are going to be, once people see this, they're going to say, well, my kid's football club does this, and that's how we vote on which jerseys to do and which away conferences we're going to go to and stuff like that, and it works great. So next time the condo board's figuring out why voting is such a goddamn hassle, right? Somebody's going to go, hey, why won't we do this? And they go, yeah, oh, okay, wow, and we don't have to build our own DApp. We can just do it through the built-in tools, right? I can just go down to my voting, it's the football club and the water district and the small town, voting system. These things are, there's so many things that our union, right, are a DAC, a company, a decentralized sort of virtual company that's got 60 people, and we're all working on projects, but none of us live in the same place. We don't have to go anywhere to vote. Voting is such a hassle. People are so aware of it right now with what's happening with elections and stuff like that, that it's just, and there's never been a really easy sort of solution available. So we're taking this and we're saying, you don't even have to, it's blockchain, but don't worry about that, because you're not going to really have to, you can deal with that if you want to, but basically it's just going to be invisible to you. So you take these voting tools, make them work the way people want, make it easy and convenient, make it provable, immutable, but they don't have to worry about blockchain, right? I think that's a killer app.
100%. Yeah. What's the status of this rollout, and what's going to be the, because you say do work, get rewards. So what's going to be the reward for the Telos, or is it Good Block that's building this? So what's the reward? No, that's just open source.
Well, first of all, everything on Telos is open source. DStore is not open source for reasons, but Telos, but everything on Telos, all the things we do, all our voting stuff is all open source, fully open source. In fact, any other chain is free to borrow this. We created this. It's actually been a really interesting, process where we had it for ourselves. We realized, and for several months have been wanting to move towards this ability to share it with anybody. We started working with programs like Seeds, which is such a great.
The founder of Seeds, Reiki, lives about 2 kilometers away from me.
Oh, dude, that guy is my hero. I get to work with him a lot. He's just such a great guy. I'm jealous. So
Oh,
great guy, great project. We've been working very closely. They're on Telos, of course, and they're on Telos for a lot of reasons. You can ask him, but my understanding, and I work pretty close with them as well, because I'm all in for seeds. I think it's great. Um, there's a lot of alignment in the fact that we launched the way we did, and we're not, that we're truly decentralized. And so Seeds and a lot of company and a lot of organizations like Seeds are deploying for that reason. But there's also a lot of these organizations that have had a lot of sort of big dreams, pie in the sky. Hey, let's do this. Let's use all this blockchain stuff we've been talking about to let people vote and do all these things that didn't ever quite have a chance to figure out exactly how they were going to do that, right? They knew they were going to do it somehow, but they thought it was going to take time. I mean, Reiki told me that Telos saved them a year of development,
right.
not having to do that, put them a year ahead. That's pretty huge at the timescales that all these things move. In turn, they were building a lot of these front ends for their really awesome dApp. And I said, hey, why don't you guys, you're going to do that open source anyway. Why don't you work with the Telos developers, make some of these open source, get paid for some, for your work through the work proposal system, and also, and grants and things like that. And as a result, be able to go faster. So, and also pay forward the fact that, the back-end tools were created by Telos and saved you a year. Why don't you guys help us save other groups another year, another 6 months in their development, but not having to do their own bespoke front end, when frankly, they're all going to be 99% the same anyway, right? So we're really trying to, we have limited resources, but we're really trying to, as best as any decentralized organization can, work together, not reproduce a lot of efforts where it doesn't make sense. And that's actually been one of the secrets for our success, is that we coordinate pretty darn well for a decentralized organization.
Gotcha. And so this voting mechanism will essentially be free to use and it will not even blockchain facing. There'll be underlays, but you don't have to interact with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% on the blockchain. It's
for sure.
Smart contract control and everything.
But you don't need to sign, for example, sign up to MetaMask or Scatter, or it'll just be very smooth, simple.
Yeah, because that would be a fail, right? That would not be a mass adoption. So what we've done, and this is all, I'm people who watch this are gonna get a little head start on some of the other announcements that we're making soon. So I'm a bad person. So we've made all kinds of tools where none of that is necessary. You can make a brand new free account on from a text, right, from a mobile phone. Verify via SMS that you're not a Google Voice thing, and that the only one is being done that way. But it's just like for a non-blockchain user, it's just like creating any other kind of account. You can put your avatar up there. You can it's much more like a social media thing. I don't know if you read about the sentiment tokens, but this is something we worked on for a while. This is a good block innovation, and now we're working with other developers. But this is the invention of the blockchain-based like or dislike or trust or distrust token. And so this is also something that's coming out that's coming out live very soon. So you could use this for a gamer badge, right? You could have immutably stored like what your win and loss ratio is on some game. And the interesting thing about sentiment tokens is, even though they exist on your account, you can't change them or get rid of them or give them to yourself. They can only be given by somebody else. It's like the inverse of how all economic tokens work, But if I want to say, hey, this guy's awesome, right? I I don't, you shouldn't be able to do that to yourself. And more to the point, if there's some account that is like, this is a real case. There's an account early on in the early days of Telos where somebody made an account called Chainrift EOS, which is the name that Chainrift used for the deposit account on EOS. It wasn't the one used on Telos, but enough people kind of got suckered in by that people did send their tokens to it. and nobody, and a lot of people knew about it, and nobody had any way to warn everyone, right? Like I sent from GoodBlock, I sent like transactions. So somebody looked and said, hey, don't send it to this account, but that's not the same thing. So with a trust token, we can have a lot of people send trust, or more to the point, distrust tokens to that account. They can say, hey, don't trust that account because it's not really chain rift. That account can get a bunch of these tokens on it from a bunch of people, different people, and your wallet, if you're using Squirrel Wallet, you'll be able to say, hey, warn me before I send anything with more than X distrust tokens, right? So you don't have to know anything about it. You try and send, then in that case, you try to send your deposit to Chainrift because you think that's the right one.
Right.
And Squirrel Wallet comes, or any of these wallets are going to come up and go, hey, this one has like 10,000 distrust things. Are you sure you want to send it? Maybe you want to look closer, right? It doesn't stop you from doing anything. You opt in, but it's the only reputation layer that exists that I know of anyway, there where people don't have to opt in to use it. So there's some really cool reputation tools, but I have to opt in. I have to opt into Riddle or something to say, okay, and I want my reputation identity layer. And that's great and has really good uses, but bad actors are not going to do that. And someday we're going to get to a point where everyone does it, so we can just assume that someone who doesn't have that is a bad actor. But in these days of blockchain, that's not the case. It's just if somebody doesn't have something, you just assume they don't use it or haven't heard of it. You don't think that they're bad because of it. So the sentiment tokens are a way to like warn people about or vouch for others without them having to opt into it, right, and participate. It happens whether or not they want to. So, and we think this is not only going to be useful for gamer badges, right, like which is going to be really cool. You're going to know nobody could fake that they have 7,000 wins on some game, right?
Right.
So you could have a legit board, leaderboard of who has the most wins, losses, and stuff like this on various games. That's immutable and provable, right, and that people can't game easily themselves. You can have like a eBay style rankings for through this trust token for anyone selling stuff on based on Telos. You can have you can like things. I mean, we could say, hey, how is this big proxy going to vote? And they could go, we're going to vote for we're going to vote for 11 block producers that we choose, and also the top 10 block producers in terms of likes from people, right? There's a lot of ways that these things can be used. No one else has this. Anyone could have it. We didn't patent this. We kept it open source. We told the world about it, but nobody else is going to have it for a while, and it's going to be deeply integrated into Telos. So all these people who are coming to use these things are also going to have all these like really sort of social media-esque blockchain features that just feel really comfortable for them, right? And they don't have to know how it works under the hood. They just have to use it. That's a real opportunity and really something that's going to set Telos aside, apart from the other blockchains in the space, I think.
100%. Being able to interact with systems that on the UI, the front end, don't feel like they're blockchain, that I think we can all agree in the space is where adoption is really going to start taking off. And then, crypto space, tons of scams going around here and there. So if you're introducing different systems that allow for more trust, more reputability, that's also going to really help mass adoption. So, Grandma Jenkins doesn't come in and send her money to the wrong person. Oh, it said this was TD Bank, so off it went.
Right. I'm not sure that grandma's always, I would like my aunt to, let's go like
let's
one
scale
generation.
it back one. Okay.
Scale it back a generation. That would be good.
The grandma generation, they're gone.
Right.
We're never going to get them. They're
going to send you a check on your birthday, right? But your aunt,
right.
But your aunt might be using some of these new tools, and more to the point, your peers or your kids are going to be using it. So we're going to universities now. I love it because those guys are just totally in. they want to know how they can get on board. We were getting great responses. So we actually have also a university outreach program that we're doing that I think is going to, a lot of these things are sort of longer investments, but I mean, a couple of years from now, we're going to have a bunch of kids coming out from college who saw these programs and started leaning into Telos and participating, right?
Gotcha. And so you guys have been around for now 1 year shy, 2 weeks, I believe. Yeah.
Mainnet launch. Yeah. So as a project, we actually started not long after EOS mainnet was launched, and announced then. And obviously, it was about a month before that we started working and kind of building consensus around a bunch of people in the space and talking it out. So it's been a long project for there, but as a mainnet launch, we launched on the December 12th of 2018. And so that's coming up really quick.
And there's some significance to that 1 year anniversary as well as it relates to EOS, I believe. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So one of the things we did was we said, look, we're giving our tokens to people. We don't know if they want them or not. We hope that they will accept them. We want to make it the easiest possible thing in the world to kind of claim your tokens. There's no claim process. You don't have to send an email anywhere. All you have to do, the tokens already exist. You just have to use them one time, basically sign one time to indicate that, yeah, we're going to use the same. We buy into the governance. We want this. So we realized, though, that there would also be people who either don't like Telos or don't want to be part of that, or for whatever reasons aren't going to do that. So rather than have those tokens just be sort of dead zombie tokens forever, we said 18 months ago, at the 1 year mark, those could be taken back to do something with those for the chain. We didn't know exactly what they were going to be, but we did say it's at block 63 million blocks after activation, which is block 64 million, which is a little over a year. Those are going to be eligible for the block producers at the time, if they so choose, to do something with, to take those back. Mm-hmm. And then when we did our Telos Economic Development Plan vote, the idea was, okay, now we know what we would do with those. If that happens, we know that we're going to put those into the fund in order to keep the high staking rewards and the high funding for worker proposal systems and things like that going. So that's the ideal thing, the ideal use for the chain for those, if we do that. So the first time we could do that is block 64 million, which is around the 18th of December. And I don't know what will happen, but I think generally, if we've given people 18 months of notice and we haven't wavered from it. It's not like we're moving it up or changing any of the rules at all, and we've further sort of ratified that with people's buy-in on the TED plan vote. We feel pretty strongly that that's what people want. The people who are actually users and engaged in the community of Telos want us to do. So I as a block producer would vote for doing that sometime after the 18th. And we are also putting all the machinery together. There's a technological side to that. And we, for several weeks months actually, have been putting together all the pieces so that we can do that. We'll absolutely listen to the community. I mean, Telos block producers are voted by the regular voters. And if they don't want us to do that, then I'm sure that'll sway a lot of people. But my sense is that generally people would like some clarity on that. And also taking that's a bunch of staked tokens, by the way, and that is a contributing factor to CPU exploits on because it's a bunch of stake stuff that people can't use. And one of the pieces of the trim plan to manage the resource management is to put the network into sort of a low leeway mode, right? So that people are actually having to pay for their resources. One of the problems that happened on EOS is not just that people's resource use got locked down, it's that they had been used to almost free resource use prior to that. And so that change was equally bad to the actual clamping down. people weren't prepared for that. And we think if we remove or greatly lessen the amount of free resource usage, and actually change that by having a clear program of free resource usage, like we do, and to a limited scope, like we do for free, like we've done all along for free account creation, things like that, then people will be much more accustomed to how the system works, and they'll be better able to, and it won't become such a shock when these resource attacks come. But having a bunch of stake tokens works against that no one's ever going to use, works against that.
Got it. So we've covered a good amount, but I know that there's a lot in the ecosystem that's being built. What would be the number one thing that we haven't touched on yet that you're the most excited about? Maybe that's been announced, hasn't been announced, that's in your back pocket.
Well, I can't really share stuff that hasn't been announced, but that's other people's stuff. There are a lot of dApps that are coming to Telos, some surprises, some from other blockchains, and that is we're gonna be seeing that over a period of time. But that's not really mine to announce. But I'm personally excited about just the amount of dApps that are coming. At the same time, we have been working with. We've been going to these expos that are not blockchain expos. They're mostly like enterprise computing expos, and we've been making a lot of inroads and connections, and working with a lot of really big companies. And what we're hearing from them is that we are really the only people reaching out to them as a public decentralized blockchain that has the capacity that they need. And so far, they've been going to groups like Hedera Hashgraph and R3 and IBM Hyperledger Fabric, because they have the speed and capacity they need. But a lot of these, especially people on their second and beyond blockchain projects, really understand the need for being decentralized. If anything is going to have a sort of consumer-facing element to it. So I think there's a lot of really interesting things that are going to come out in terms of working with enterprise, in terms of working with the Internet of Things, Internet of Trustless Things built on Telos. We built a lot of POCs. There's some stuff you can see, like that the Telos safe, right? That you see. I think there would be an amazing Telos locker, like an Amazon locker, right? We've already built these things. We built supply chain POCs, and so these things in the next period of time are going to be rolling out, not super quickly, but they're definitely coming. I'm very excited about that. I'm sort of more about the long term, like the stuff that's happening tomorrow is stuff that I was excited about 6 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, because that's when I kind of was most involved. And so a lot of us who on the Telos Foundation, or me, I'm not on the Telos Foundation, but with the Telos Core Devs, or other groups that are just going out and doing this outreach, we're seeing stuff that's going to be happening a little bit down the road, but it's really big stuff. I have no concerns about what will happen with Telos or what the bright future we have. It's just a question for me of exactly when that happens. But I'm very excited about it, and very excited about all the people coming in. The adoption that we're seeing from the developing world, like in Africa and South America and other places, is really exciting, because if you can capture the university students and the people in the developing world and people like that, and get them to actually be doing proposals to build, where you're helping pay them to build on your system, if you can get that group, then you've captured the future. And that's really what we want to do. We went on Telos, we're really about empowering the future, empowering people to find their own purpose, and to align with other people with similar purposes, and to build things. And all that's happening. So I'm really quite happy and excited about the future.
I think that's a beautiful statement and a phenomenal way to end it off. Douglas, thanks so much for coming on. I fully support the vision, the ethos, the heart behind what you guys are doing, the entire foundation, the journey. I think it's immensely commendable for what you guys have gone through, all the struggles, the really just grinding it out for a better tomorrow. I really applaud you guys, and thanks for coming on to share a little bit about Telos.
Wow, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that, and I love it when people get it. Thanks very much for having me.
All right. And to everyone who's listening, see you next time.